Trump makes one major mistake with his response to the ICE shooting, and I've got 3 interviews. Pete Buttigieg, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro all talk about the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. If Donald Trump, along with J.D. Vance and Kristi Noem, have made one thing clear, it's that if his federal prosecutors have sole jurisdiction over the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, there will be no justice. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, even before a fraction of the investigation had begun, Trump logged onto Truth Social and said that the victim, Renee Good, an innocent mother of 3, quote, violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer who is now recovering in the hospital. All of that is completely untrue, not even a kernel of truth. The same sentiment was echoed by Vance and then Noem, all of whom, of course, accede to this Trumpian mentality where you can never accept responsibility for anything going wrong ever. You have to just dig in, pretend you are right 100% of the time, and never accept blame for anything. And that's what's happening here. But here's the problem. Because those people all felt the need to do this and to do it publicly, because that's the Trump way, now the people who Trump's DOJ have to send into court to convince that the federal government needs sole jurisdiction over this case have been left twisting in the wind. Like, if you're a prosecutor, how do you convince a judge that you need to ice out state prosecutors and give the federal government sole jurisdiction when the federal government was just out on TV and out on the internet within 5 minutes pre-clearing the killer? You can't. Which yet again puts Trump's federal prosecutors in the impossible position of having to argue Trump's position, which Trump himself undermines every time he opens his mouth. Granted, that won't stop this DOJ from saying whatever they can to deliver for their God King, right? And so they'll go into court and they'll offer up every excuse in the world for Trump and every assurance in the world that Renee Good is going to get her just and impartial investigation because these people have no scruples, they have no shame. Which means it could not be more important that state prosecutors in Minnesota fight to ensure that they get to investigate this crime concurrently, that they not get iced out of this process, that they sue for access to all of the evidence if they need to. You're going to hear from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey in a few minutes, but he reveals to me that the feds are already blocking state investigators from gaining access to evidence that they need. That's by design. It's because Trump issued his edict, his conclusion, and now the whole purpose, as far as Pam Bondi's DOJ is concerned, is to absolve this ICE agent. That's how this Justice Department works. Trump decides guilt or innocence based solely on political affiliation, and then prosecutors, aligned with Trump, seek evidence to support that conclusion. And why is it so important that state prosecutors do a legitimate investigation? Because if there's no legitimate accountability for lawless behavior, then these killings at the hands of this rogue agency will not be the exception, they'll be the rule. We'll see more and more and more. Consider, too, there have already been 16 ICE-related shootings. 16. And it's not surprising when you consider who the agents are that are being recruited. According to NBC News, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has placed new recruits into its training program before they've completed the agency's vetting process, an unusual sequence of events as it rushes to hire federal immigration officers to carry out President Donald Trump's mass deportation policy. ICE officials only later discovered that some of the recruits failed drug testing, have disqualifying criminal backgrounds, or don't meet the physical or academic requirements to serve. So is it any surprise that these people don't know what the fuck they're doing? There was a video going around this weekend of an ICE agent slipping, ironically enough, on the ice, and the gun that he was holding fires because his finger was on the trigger. Like, if you were to engineer in a lab the most dangerous, lawless, rogue agency, you would do exactly what the Trump administration did to orchestrate this iteration of ICE. But if they feel unburdened by the law because the DOJ gives them carte blanche to commit crimes with impunity, as they're trying to do, then what we're dealing with right now will feel quaint, which puts a big burden on state prosecutors in Minnesota to step up and ensure that these rogue agents know that they are not immune, both for Renee Good and her family, and unfortunately for the next person who will inevitably fall victim to these jackbooted thugs who want to cosplay as soldiers while terrorizing American cities. Next up are my interviews with Pete Buttigieg, Jacob Frey, and Josh Shapiro. I'm joined now by the former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Pete, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to start first and foremost with this tragic and unnecessary shooting and killing in Minneapolis. We've obviously all seen the footage, but I think what's especially striking today is the fact that we're seeing a lot of these Trump administration officials, including J.D. Vance, including Kristi Noem, basically double down in defense of the ICE agent who committed this atrocity and spread lies, for example, that the woman in the car, Renee Good, was seeking to run the ICE agent over. Trump himself even said outright that the ICE agent was run over and dragged down the street. And so can I have your reaction to the gaslighting happening at the hands of these administration officials?
Yeah, not only is it, of course, horrifying that a woman, an American, a mother lost her life, but that the federal government is lying about it, that we can see with our own eyes what happened. And also just the idea that she dropped her 6-year-old son off at school and then turned around and randomly decided to try to kill a federal agent just doesn't pass the basic sanity test of the things that we're expected to believe.
What does it say that this administration doesn't feel like it can offer even an ounce of, that even acknowledging objective reality seems like some capitulation to the dangerous communist Marxists on the left, and so they have to engage in this whole farce?
Well, the administration doesn't believe that it owes the American people the truth or anything else because they believe they're beyond accountability. But there needs to be accountability over this. Look, Secretary Kristi Noem has not yet faced accountability for the Texans who may have lost their lives in the floods last year because it took her days to authorize search and rescue teams. They lost their lives or may have lost their lives over that. Now a Minnesota woman lost her life yesterday in an incident that never should have happened. She should be with her family, alive and well right now. We have an ICE agent who, by the way, is or should have been trained not to be in front of a vehicle and never to shoot into a moving vehicle. And yet this happened on her watch. The whole point of Homeland Security is to make this country more stable and safe. And it is very clear on this administration's watch that the opposite is what's happening.
Do you think that the administration derives some benefit from instances like this taking place? Because we've seen that Trump often wants to create some inciting incident that he then uses as a pretext to be able to ramp up or escalate tensions, send in the military, send in the National Guard. He tried to do it in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Portland, in Washington, D.C. And so now we have basically, an uprising delivered on a silver platter, thanks again to ICE itself. And so do you think that the administration actually benefits or wants stuff like this to take place so that they can use this as the pretext that they're looking for?
If this was about public safety, if this was really about immigration, they would be doing things very differently. It's clear that this president knows that he is better off when Americans are fearful, chaotic, divided, and these ICE deployments and National Guard deployments are part of that. This is not about ICE's actual mission, which is, by the way, an important one of securing the border and enforcing immigration law. This is about making sure that there is an atmosphere of fear and division in this country, an atmosphere that in some ways has been at least beneath the surface and sometimes exploding to the surface for all of the last 10 years since the Trump era began when he came down that escalator. And of course, when we are divided, fearful, and angry, it is harder to focus on solving problems like the problems he promised to solve about being able to afford the cost of living in this country. He doesn't want to be explaining why costs have gone up instead of down since he took power. He doesn't want to explain why the economy is getting worse and not better, why it's harder, not easier to get through life, why health care premiums just shot up as of this month. So, of course, it is to his benefit to have these kind of provocative and, in the case of yesterday, deadly situations unfolding in our cities.
What do you think should happen with ICE? Because on one hand, I've heard you say that the mission of ICE as it relates to the border is important. On the other hand, we've spoken about the fact that the agents that actually work within ICE are clearly not trained, that ICE is clearly comprised of folks who are not qualified to be doing those jobs, who are not qualified to be handling weapons, certainly not qualified to be engaging with Americans or even these undocumented immigrants. And so there's a little bit of that dichotomy there. What should happen to ICE? Is it a salvageable agency?
Look, of course, we need to have borders and we need to have laws, and somebody needs to be protecting those borders and enforcing the laws. But this is not that. And what ICE has become, what ICE has been used for, has nothing to do with keeping us safe. And in many cases, including this mother of three, this American mother of three who lost her life yesterday, it's doing the opposite. That's why when you have any part of the federal government that is empowered with the ability to use deadly force, that it has to be accountable, that it has to be transparent, that it has to be lawful. And we don't see evidence of any of that. So it's not about what name you give to the agency that handles immigration law. It's about what they're actually doing. And while most Americans agree and believe that we ought to have and enforce borders and laws, I think most Americans also see that this has gone way out of hand, that it is out of control, and that it is now hurting, not helping, public safety in this country.
When I watch the J.D. Vance press conference or the Kristi Noem press conference, where these people are doubling down on this idea that the victim here, again, who was just a mother driving home from dropping her kid off at school, unarmed, not some professional agitator, as Trump claims, that she was part of some deep state cabal, a professional agitator, and that she was attempting to run over this ICE agent and drag him down the street. When I hear that kind of stuff, and the fact that they're going to, of course, back up the ICE agent who was involved in this shooting, who perpetuated this shooting, this killing, it leaves me with a sense of of despair and hopelessness that there even exists any semblance of accountability. And by the way, I think that's by design at the hands of this administration. So I want to ask, what should be done? What could be done to rectify this so that people don't see this kind of stuff happen and just say, you know what, this is America now. Whatever the God King decrees is gonna be law, and the rest of us just kind of get screwed.
There has to be justice and accountability under the law. And if that's not happening, then the accountability comes to the American people and the political process to replace the leaders who are failing to make this a nation of laws. I get that not everybody is going to study the video frame by frame and notice that the agent is to the left of the car while the wheels of the car are turned to the right. But everybody should get that when your government is lying to you, and especially when your government is lying to you about how it went about killing an American citizen, that is not just a failure of one person, one officer, or one department. That is a failure of leadership at the highest levels. And it's one more reason why the American people, who already, by and large, do not support this president, need to stand up, speak up, and demand something different.
What is your message to Trump supporters who believed him when he said, when he said that he was going to defend law and order, this long-standing Republican principle of of making sure that people are armed and that the Second Amendment is strong so that we can stand up against government tyranny? This is what government tyranny looks like. So a lot of the things that the Trump administration kind of built its branding on, they are actually executing the things that they once purported to condemn. And so, what would your message to Trump supporters be in light of this?
I think my message to Trump supporters is this guy does not deserve your support. You supported him, maybe enthusiastically, maybe reluctantly, because you expected him to make your life better off. But he said he was going to do these things and did the opposite. He said he was going to lower costs. He did the opposite. He said he was going to put forward a plan to make your healthcare more affordable and better. He did the opposite. He said that America would become a more peaceable and safe place on his watch. We are seeing instead how he is deliberately stirring up chaos and turning Americans against each other. People may have supported him for any number of reasons, but he is not delivering even on the reasons he offered to his own supporters, let alone what the majority of Americans actually want and believe.
Well, one of those things that he also promised his supporters was this idea that he was going to focus on an America First agenda, which presumably didn't include taking over the country of Venezuela, and yet that's what we've seen take place. And so can I have your reaction to this Bush-era redux that we're seeing right now, where the No New Wars president has engaged in a new foreign intervention in South America expressly to take the oil?
We learned this the hard way within my lifetime, that trying to take over another country when there is no need to do that is bad news for the American people, especially now that he's doubled down and said that we might be running Venezuela for years. What makes anyone think that this White House can run Venezuela when they can't even run the United States? They have failed to deliver the things that Americans need, like more affordable energy bills and healthcare and groceries. The last thing that we need them to be doing is trying to run another country.
So something that I've been especially concerned about is if we're going to engage in imperialism 2.0, and we go into Venezuela, we go into Colombia, Cuba, Greenland, whatever it may be in the Western Hemisphere, because we're doing, some second iteration of the Monroe Doctrine, the Donroe Doctrine. What does that do when you look at our competitors, a country like China, for example, where they say, okay, now we've got the green light to go into the places that we want to invade? China's obviously looking at Taiwan. Taiwan controls the majority of the world's semiconductors, which is the technology of the future. And so we're basically going into South America so that we can double down on the technology of yesterday, on fossil fuels, while basically giving a green light to China to be able to position themselves to own the world in the future.
It absolutely frees the hands of countries like China and Russia to pursue aggression in ways that sooner or later will make us worse off here at home. It's also very disturbing in the context of the way they're talking about our allies. Take this talk about Greenland, which is a Danish territory. I served in Afghanistan alongside Danish soldiers. That country actually proportionally, by some ways of counting, gave more in terms of lives to the coalition than any U.S. ally. Do you really think they're going to be going out of their way for us, looking to the future? And, one of the things we saw with Venezuela is a reminder that when he says something that might seem crazy at first, they're prepared to actually follow through on it, which is why, again, we can't just leave it to him. He's told reporters, and the only constraint that he respects is his own mind, which seems to be deteriorating as we speak. There are other constraints, including Congress. Now is a time when congressional Republicans ought to stand with Democrats and make it clear that if this president does something like unjustified aggression against a NATO ally, that could be the very definition of an impeachable offense.
When people hear about the prospect of NATO being dismantled, and if the U.S. does opt to invade Greenland, for example, or try and purchase Greenland, whatever it may be, that would effectively be a death knell for NATO. If one NATO country starts to invade another NATO country, I don't think that NATO has too long of a future after that. But people are going to hear that, and they're going to, we've learned in politics that warning people of something that might happen at some untold point in the future, certainly that's never happened, so we have no schema for it, isn't really an effective way at moving hearts and minds. And so I'm just curious from your vantage, when people hear about these international affairs and the prospect of a weakened or dismantled NATO, why does that matter? What could that signal moving forward?
The important thing about NATO is that it has helped keep us safe here in America. We've got to remember that the last 80 years or so, without a major global war, is the exception and not the norm. And these institutions and organizations aren't perfect, but the fundamental mission of NATO was to establish and secure peace and security for its members. And if we lose that, we've got a whole other set of things to worry about. Americans have enough to worry about right now, with power bills the way they are, grocery costs the way they are, health insurance premiums shooting up, housing harder and harder to find and afford. The last thing we need to add to that set of worries is to make wars more likely for us or anybody else.
Watching all of this stuff play out, do you think that all of the, foreign incursions, the saber rattling against Greenland, the extracting Nicolas Maduro out of Venezuela, engaging in another oil war. Do you think that's an effort to distract from Trump's failures at home?
It's not unusual when a president is growing unpopular and their economy is getting weaker. In this or a lot of other countries, it's not unusual for them to turn to foreign war as an attempt to divert resources and attention from their failures at home. And it's an example of a pattern that I think we can expect more of over the coming year, which is, on one hand, Donald Trump is growing weaker. Even Republicans are more likely to defy him than they were just a few months ago. But even while he's growing weaker, in fact, because he's growing weaker, he's also growing more dangerous. And I think we can continue to see dangerous, provocative, sometimes deadly decisions precisely because he can see that he is losing his grip on power here at home.
Pete, what's next for you?
I'm going to spend the next year trying to make myself useful for candidates and causes that I believe in. I'm not on the ballot, but I'm going to be traveling the country. I'm going to be taking to the airwaves, making the case for a different kind of politics. And in particular, I'm trying to prepare my party, the Democratic Party, for the same thing that I see a lot of Republicans starting to position themselves for, which is life after Donald Trump. The reality is that he will not be dominating U.S. politics forever. And the day he leaves the political scene, that isn't the end goal of our politics, it's the beginning. Because that moment, we all have to be asking ourselves, what's next? How do we make sure that we have a politics and a government that actually will serve us well? That is much more complicated than just reversing the damage and going back to the way things looked a few years ago. And so I'm going to be out there making the case for that, and of course, trying to help good leaders get elected.
Are there any folks that you're keeping a particular eye on right now?
Well, in a few days, I'll be in Wisconsin. We're doing a town hall there in the district of Derek Van Orden. He's a Republican congressman who refuses to face his own constituents, and he's drawn a very convincing Democratic challenge from Rebecca Cook. That's one example of a district and a region that I'm watching closely. There are a lot of places that may not be on your obvious list of Democratic or progressive turf, much more purple or red areas, where people are thinking for themselves, asking tough questions about how their lives could get better. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for leadership to arise in those kinds of places. So that's going to kind of be my specialty in the months ahead.
And of course, I would have to ask as well, in the aftermath of midterms, do you presume that you're going to do any run for office after that?
I'm a good ways away from any big life decisions or big political decisions. The big decision I made is that I know how to spend 2026, which is helping causes and candidates that I believe in and trying to prepare our party, my party, for the really serious, deep thinking we need to do that goes a lot deeper than the important project of trying to move on from this president.
We'll leave it there. Secretary Pete, thanks so much for taking the time.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
I'm joined now by the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we've obviously watched the tragedy unfold in your city of Minneapolis. I have to ask first and foremost, as we watch the Trump administration respond to a lot of what's happened, that it seems like they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on defending the ICE agent, even presenting lies such as this idea that the ICE agent was targeted or hit by the victim here, or even, as Trump said, dragged under the car. So can I have your reaction first and foremost to this response by administration officials?
Look, I would totally understand it if they wanted to say, hang on, let's wait for an investigation to commence and for us to get all the facts in a fair and justifiable way. But what makes absolutely no sense to me is to look at a video, see clearly with your own eyes what is happening, and then try to create a different narrative entirely. I mean, they are trying to say that the ICE agent was acting in self-defense and that the victim was a domestic terrorist. That could not be further from the truth. Clearly, when you're going through a 1, 2, 3, even 4-point turn, you're backing up and trying to get out of there. Leave is the primary goal. Not hit somebody, not use force, not injure an agent or anybody else. The primary goal, in my mind, seemed to be getting out of there. And, if you watch the video, that's what ultimately happens. She leaves and tragically and horrifically was killed in the process.
Well, there is reporting now that as this process is going to play out, as the aftermath of this process is going to play out, that Minnesota investigators are being told that they can't access evidence because the FBI isn't willing to work jointly with them on a probe. So can you confirm as much? And can I have your reaction if it's indeed true that the federal government seems to be shutting state prosecutors out?
So that is my understanding. We learned the same thing a few hours ago. Our initial our initial understanding was that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at the state level was going to conduct an investigation jointly with the FBI, only to learn this morning that the BCA in Minnesota was taken out of it. By the way, like the BCA is not some like weirdo, radical, crazy group or something that is going to have a result that is predetermined. This is a group that operates out of the state level, filled largely with people in law enforcement, but they've conducted fair investigations and come to different conclusions. In fact, they just collect evidence. And the investigations that they have conducted have at times resulted in a finding of no culpability, and at times have resulted in a finding that a charge should move forward. And so to just exclude this group entirely is deeply concerning to me and runs part and parcel with what we've seen from this Trump administration, which is they want to control the narrative, even when the narrative runs counter to exactly what we're seeing on live video. I mean, that's one of the most crazy things here is like you can see the video. It's right there in front of you. And for them to create this garbage BS narrative from the get-go is problematic, to say the least. I heard what Kristi Noem was saying, and it struck me as someone that did not believe a word that she herself was saying.
Do you have confidence that Pam Bondi's DOJ, Kash Patel's FBI is going to conduct a fair and proper investigation, especially in light of the fact that all of these administration officials, including Kristi Noem, including J.D. Vance, including the President of the United States, have already basically come out and offered their conclusion, which is that, the ICE agent did nothing wrong, and in fact, he was only defending himself in front of, imminent risk or death?
Yeah, that's obviously deeply concerning. I hate to pass judgment on an investigation when it's only commencing, but when you see an administration that doesn't seem to care about the facts and is running to their conclusion from the very get-go, no, that does not inspire confidence that you're going to get a result of justice. And justice, by the way, doesn't mean conviction. Justice means fairness. Justice means you look at the truth. Justice means you see what happens in the video, you interview the witnesses, you take forensic evidence and whatever else, and you come to a conclusion based on it. That's my concern right now, is that justice is not the primary goal. Narrative, chaos, and a whole lot of dysfunction seems to be the primary driver.
So on that point of chaos and dysfunction, we've seen instances where, in fact, the Trump administration will try to incite chaos, will try to incite dysfunction by, sending in ICE agents, for example, into cities that have strong immigrant communities, like my city of Los Angeles, like Portland, like Chicago, like Washington, D.C. And when the easily predictable response to those ICE agents coming in is that people come out and protest them, as is their constitutionally protected right to do, then the administration uses that as a pretext to be able to send in the National Guard, to send in the U.S. military. So is there some concern here that the White House will see, a very, again, righteous, predictable response from the fact that an innocent woman was just shot and killed at the hands of a rogue ICE agency, and basically use the resulting protest as a pretext to be able to send in more troops and basically ramp up the violence so that they can ultimately get what they want, which is yet another state, yet another city where the Trump administration can flex its muscles?
Yeah, man, edit copy what you just said and put that in my answer. I mean, that's the deal. They are looking for any excuse to deploy a militarized occupation
Yeah.
in our city. We already have thousands of ICE agents, border control, and beyond. And this level of chaos and concern and the tragedy that happened, sadly, was entirely predictable. In fact, we predicted it. The chief of police and I were talking not just privately, but very publicly for over a month, saying that the kind of conduct that they are engaging in could very well lead to a resident, an ICE agent, or a police officer getting badly hurt or killed. Sadly, the latter is what happened. Innocent person got killed. Our city is grieving. But here's the thing. We're not going to take the bait. We are going to rise collectively to the occasion. We're going to meet that hate with a whole lot of love. We're going to meet that chaos with peace. We're going to push for justice every step of the way. And we're also going to recognize that the way that our immigrant communities could be hurt the most is by having even more of an occupation in our city. And so the tried and true and the nearly uniform message that I have been hearing from public officials, from community members, has been, of course, express First Amendment rights, but let's not give them an excuse.
Yeah. Have you spoken to either the Attorney General or the District Attorney about engaging in some state level or local level prosecution, even if and when the federal government tries to basically usurp control of this whole investigation, so that they can basically just absolve the ICE agent?
We have a number of conversations happening presently about what litigation will and should look like. We have already been preemptively suing the Trump administration, along with a number of other mayors and governors and attorneys general from around the country. We do believe we have some routes here going forward, but I don't want to jump the gun too much before we know what the best route is. So the answer ultimately is yes, we believe we have some form of outlet, but I don't want to predict that before we know entirely what it looks like.
I guess the broader question, kind of along the same lines, though, is that there is some concern that the Trump administration will just try to basically usurp control of any investigation. And so in the event that the federal government does try to take control, are you confident that there will be a state or local level prosecution that will take place in parallel, so that even if and when nothing happens at the federal level, because we know it's not going to happen at the federal level, we can have some confidence that there will be, if not accountability, at least a fair process, so that we can get toward accountability?
You're asking all the right questions right now, and we are working on it. We don't know yet what that might look like. We want to make sure that we, unlike they, are operating by the Constitution and under the law. We want to make sure that we, unlike them, are pushing for justice. And we got to make sure that we're in lockstep with a number of other partners that obviously have authority over some of these things, which I don't.
Have you spoken to the family at all, or those who've survived Renee Good? Is there any sense of how the family is holding up amid all of this?
We've made some contact with a representative. I really don't want to speak, though.
Yeah.
The answer is no. I have not yet talked with the family, but I don't want to. I can't imagine what they're feeling right now. All the love in the world that I've got, and the 435,000 residents that call Minneapolis home, is with them.
There was a moment where, among all of the clips that had been circulating, that the news had spoken to one, I don't know if he was in his 20s maybe, and he basically came out and said, like, I'm pretty right wing. This isn't the way to do this. Have you heard from folks in Minneapolis or even around the country who may be of that political persuasion, who've had, not the same response that Trump and Vance and Kristi Noem have had to this?
Countless, and that gives me a whole lot of hope. Because this is a moment where we got to love our country more than our ideology. This is a moment when we've got to understand that the foundation that is our Constitution is being violated. And whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, you need to stand up right now for the endurance of our republic. And here's the thing. You can't just come into our city and pluck somebody off the street, discriminating only on the basis of are they Somali or are they Latino, and then having no discrimination thereafter. In other words, if they are Somali, we can detain you. If you're Latino, we can take you out of the neighborhood, put you in a car, and nobody even knows where you're going. That's not okay under our Constitution, period. And everybody should be standing up against that. And so, moreover, I think the kind of conduct that we've seen over and over again has seen a predictable conclusion, which is people getting hurt and ultimately killed. We've seen pregnant women dragged through the street. We've seen teenagers yanked out of cars. We have seen over and over again, not a law enforcement body that is pushing for de-escalation tactics, not a law enforcement body that is methodically trying to root out crime, but one that is not based in safety at all. And this is a really important point here because, look, I'm pro law enforcement. We have worked with federal agents before to drive down crime. We've worked with the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and successfully driven down crime together in areas like North Minneapolis. Right now, we're seeing historic lows on the north side in terms of shootings. That ain't this.
Yeah.
Trying to find murderers is not what they're doing. Trying to methodically find people that have done horrible things in our city and hurt people and engaged in narcotics trade, that's not what they were doing. If they were, I'm all in, man. We're anti-murder in Minneapolis. We're pro-safety. But what I will not tolerate is this kind of constitutional violation that is happening repeatedly, and ICE is engaging in it. You got them coming in. They clearly have not been trained in on constitutional law. They've not been trained in on de-escalation tactics. It seems like they themselves answered a call to enter ICE in the very recent future, take a decent paycheck, and hey, we're going to fly across the country or whatever to come out to Minneapolis to cause a whole lot of havoc. That's what it seems like. It also seems like they're taking these orders from up top that can't even be followed. I think that somebody probably from very high up said, hey, go to Minneapolis and try to deport a bunch of Somalis. And nobody properly pushed back. And then they get here and realize, shit, all the Somalis are they're legal. They're American citizens.
Yeah.
The vast majority are here legally. And then they're wondering what to do next.
Right.
This is, again, not a methodical operation.
Last question here. You obviously made a lot of news yesterday when you, what I think was very correctly, told ICE to get the fuck out of Minneapolis. That was followed by, I think, a wave of faux outrage on the right, which is especially surprising considering Donald Trump, their leader, is not exactly puritanical when it comes to his rhetoric. So can I have your reaction to, I think, the wave of pearl clutching that we saw among Republicans who seem to have forgotten who their president is?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I offended their Disney princess ears. When you compare the inflammatory nature of dropping an F-bomb, and by the way, Donald Trump has said far worse, to killing somebody, which one of those is more inflammatory? The F-bomb, killing somebody?
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to killing somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the inflammatory one here. And so, no, I stand by everything that I said. Absolutely. They can do the faux outrage all they want. But I mean every word I said, including the F word.
We'll leave it there. Mayor Frey, thanks so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it. And good luck as you continue to navigate, this whole, again, unnecessary tragedy at the hands of ICE in your city.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm joined now by the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me back.
So we have watched as violence has kind of taken place at the hands of this rogue ICE agent in Minneapolis. And of course, that's led to protests and the Trump administration responding by doubling down and defending the actions of this ICE agent. J.D. Vance, for example, came out and basically suggested, as did Donald Trump, that it was the fault of the victim and that the ICE agent himself had nothing to do with it. And in fact, the administration continues to perpetuate this lie that the ICE agent was even hit. Trump said that he was dragged down the street. And so can I have your reaction to the fact that in light of, these tragic this tragic shooting, the Trump administration doubles down on the actions of the perpetrator and attacks the victim?
Yeah. I mean, look, first, let's just start by saying we mourn the loss of life in Minnesota. And this woman left behind children. These children don't have a mom, and left behind a spouse who doesn't have a loved one with them anymore. I mean, this is so tragic. And this is the consequence of what occurs when you have law enforcement coming in and working not in concert with other levels of law enforcement, but coming in and eviscerating, really eroding the trust that you work so hard to build. Look, as governor, I've worked incredibly hard to build trust between the police and the community. And as a result, gun violence is down 42% in Pennsylvania. Violent crime is down 12%. But I think what is needed right now as it relates to this tragic situation in Minnesota is a full investigation, an honest investigation. I've been part of those investigations as the former chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And what you need in those cases when you're doing these tough investigations is for the state, local, and federal governments to be working together. And so in addition to all of the heated rhetoric from J.D. Vance yesterday and all the untruths he told, all the lies he told yesterday, we also learned that the federal government is not participating in this investigation. And by failing to do so, you can't ensure that justice will be done. You can't repair the loss of trust that exists in a community. And I'll say this, these investigations are really hard. These investigations, at least on my watch, sometimes resulted in a law enforcement officer being charged and sometimes resulted in them not being charged. But we always followed the evidence. We always applied the law without fear or favor. And what you're seeing from this White House is a lack of respect for the rule of law and injecting more chaos in our communities.
Do you presume that by virtue of trying to ice out, no pun intended, but ice out state investigators, as the Trump administration is trying to do in Minnesota? I spoke with the mayor of Minneapolis yesterday, and he confirmed that that whereas normally state prosecutors are involved in this process, that the FBI isn't sharing information with them.
Right.
Do you presume that the reason for that is the Trump administration's already made up its mind, which frankly would make sense given the fact that we've heard from Kristi Noem, we've heard from J.D. Vance, we've heard from Donald Trump, all of whom have blindly defended the actions of the ICE agents, again, even going so far as to lie about what happened?
I think what's clear is they are lying. I mean, J.D. Vance said that there's, what did he say, absolute immunity or total immunity for this ICE official. That doesn't exist if you're applying the rule of law without fear or favor. That is not a reality. Here's the reality of how these investigations work. The local prosecutors, which presumably would be the local DA or the state attorney general, whoever's got jurisdiction on the state side, would conduct a thorough investigation. In this case, it would involve local, state, and federal authorities sharing information. They would follow all of the evidence to determine whether or not that shooting was justified, right? Obviously, people have strong feelings, particularly when you just see that video. I certainly do. It does not seem justified to me, but you've got to apply all of the evidence to the law, and then you make a charging decision after that. That charging decision needs to come from those state or local prosecutors. And what J.D. Vance and others are doing is hindering that prosecution and hindering the ability for these local communities to feel safe again, to have that trust again with law enforcement that I know the mayor, the governor, and the police commissioner and others have worked so hard to build in Minneapolis and in other communities across Minnesota.
You know, we have seen the extent to which the ICE agents that have been hired are clearly not capable of doing their jobs, clearly not qualified for their jobs. In this case, are trigger happy and getting the message now from this administration that even despite the fact that they're not qualified, that they can act with impunity, that they're going to have, cover from this White House, from the J.D. Vances and Donald Trumps of the world. Is this agency tenable as it exists right now?
Well, I can't speak to their training, but I can tell you that they cannot act with impunity. That's not how the laws of our Commonwealth or this country work. They are going to be held to account. I hope that the prosecutors are able to get access to all the information they need and to make a determination as to whether or not that shooting was justified. Again, we can all render our opinions based on what we've seen in that video. I'm sure there's other evidence that needs to be looked at as well. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that you've got to have that type of investigation. No one gets to act with impunity. Let's take another piece of this, which I know is incredibly disturbing to me and many others, and that is that these ICE officials, these ICE agents, are running around masked. I can speak to the laws here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, we have very, very strict rules of the road as to when a law enforcement official can wear a mask when they're going out in public in very limited situations. And we're very careful about that because we understand that when someone is masked or perhaps they're not being identified as a law enforcement official, you can create real chaos in a community. We're very purposeful about masking. What's clear is that ICE thinks they can operate under different rules that we know breed mistrust in a community, rules that we know can lead to tragic outcomes in a community. So I share that just as one example of how you've got situations where local law enforcement, where state law enforcement are working in concert with a community. And again, here in Pennsylvania, we do that and crime is down. And when they come in and don't work in concert, tragedy strikes. Do
you have any concern? Yes, for Minneapolis, but more broadly, I mean, you're the governor of a state that has plenty of major cities, and especially important given the fact that Pennsylvania is a critical state come election time. Do you have any concern that when we see events like this, that far from it being an accident in the eyes of this administration or a tragedy in the eyes of this administration, that they view it as an opportunity because they can exploit these inciting incidents to be able to give themselves justification to send in the military, send in the National Guard, as they've been wont to do, whether it's in my city of Los Angeles, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in Portland, whether it's in Washington, D.C.
I worry about that as governor every single day. Look, my primary responsibility is to keep people safe. And we work so hard to both fund our law enforcement and also fund our community organizations. They're doing the hard work on the ground to keep people safe and then get them to work together. And so, yes, I see this administration as undermining that, as a real danger to that, as an injector of chaos into that. And so we are quite literally doing tabletop exercises to prepare should the federal government send in troops that we didn't ask for, send in ICE agents that we didn't ask for, and try and erode that trust, trying to do things that are going to protect that trust, do things to keep the peace and to keep law and order and civility here in our Commonwealth. We believe we're prepared for that. But unfortunately, we have a federal government who's working against us. You cited some other state examples, including your own state of California, where we saw that play out. And what they did was they created more danger. What we saw last night in Philadelphia, I just want to take a minute and focus on, because I think it speaks to this moment we're in. What happened in Minnesota has had an impact all across the country. You know how I know that? Because there were peaceful protests last night in Philadelphia speaking to what occurred in Minneapolis. And I want to stress the word peaceful. Why was it peaceful? Because our local police and our state police knew it was going to happen, worked with organizers to ensure that they had a safe place to peacefully protest, worked with the protesters to ensure that they were engaging in a peaceful manner so that their voices can be heard. Why do I share that with you? Because one, it speaks to the national impact the horrors of Minneapolis are having. And number two, it speaks to how we're doing things right in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and in this case, the city of Philadelphia, where we were able to have Americans come out and peacefully protest, exercise their First Amendment rights, and do so in a way where our community remains safe.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here. You have just announced your reelection for governor of Pennsylvania. What's going to be your priority as we head into this next year?
I'm going to continue to get stuff done for the good people of Pennsylvania. And by the way, if you don't mind, I got to say, if you like what we're doing, text GSD to 32210. I want to continue to build on the work that we've done to invest record amounts in public education. As a result, test scores are up and the number of teachers is rising again. I want to continue to do the hard work we've done to reduce crime in our Commonwealth. Crime is down 12%. Gun violence is down 42%. I want to continue to do the hard work to cut red tape and make strategic investments to grow our economy. As a result, we've got the only growing economy in the entire Northeast. I want to put more money back in people's pockets. I've cut taxes 7 times to reduce the burden on Pennsylvanians. Now, I've done all of that with a divided legislature. And so we've had to make compromises along the way. I'm going to work hard in these midterms, not just to reelect myself, my outstanding Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis, but to win a trifecta in the legislature, to help win those races. We've got 4 competitive U.S. House seats that really could determine the balance of power in the House of Representatives, and be able to come back after these midterms and do more, like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, holding the electric companies accountable who want to raise our rates, making sure we pass the Fairness Act, which would enshrine into law protections for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters across this Commonwealth. We got a lot more work to do. I'm proud of what we've done already. I'm proud of our get stuff done mentality and approach. We got a lot more work to do.
So I've been especially focused on redistricting across the country. I've spoken to Governors Moore, Governors obviously Newsom, Pritzker, all across the country about what happens in each respective state on redistricting. I know Pennsylvania is in a little bit of a different bucket because you have a divided legislature, right. But in the event that Democrats are able to gain a majority in the state legislature in Pennsylvania, where would you stand on the prospect of redistricting, recognizing the breadth of states on the right that have engaged in this process? And granted, we've had a couple of states on the left step up to counteract that. We've had obviously Gavin Newsom and California Democrats add 5 seats as expressly as a way to counteract, to neutralize what's happening in Texas. But we just found out that Ron DeSantis will be adding probably 3 seats in Florida, and frankly, I presume that this isn't the end of this cycle. And so in the event that we're able to see Democrats take control of the legislature, where would you stand on redistricting in PA?
So let me kind of unpack all of that. First, let me just say, Texas started it, right? They started with these mid-cycle redistricting. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, and I know you're a Californian. I appreciate the fact that Governor Newsom stepped up and in effect neutralized what happened in Texas. You're more of an expert on all the math than I am. But, in effect, what we're seeing is this race on redistricting that may kind of cancel one another out, plus or minus a little bit. Again, you're more of an expert on those numbers than I am. What I am focused on, though, and this is where we have to put 100% of our attention, is on these midterms where in my state, we will have 4 competitive U.S. House seats, where if those redistricting efforts kind of cancel one another out, again, plus or minus, it could come down to Pennsylvania again and those 4 seats. And so I don't really have the luxury of thinking too far beyond those midterms. I got to focus on these midterms and ensuring, again, not just my own reelection, but sort of rising, lifting everybody up in the process and working hard with our candidates for Congress to ensure they get across the finish line as well and put Hakeem Jeffries in the speaker's chair.
In going around Pennsylvania, talking to Pennsylvanians, I mean, your state is a good indicator of, a good bellwether of where the country lies. What have you found is among the most potent issues, especially for independents and Republicans? Like, I generally know where Democrats stand, but I think that there's some opportunity, some opening here for Democrats to get a lot of these crossover voters. In the off-year election this past November, we saw anywhere from 7 to 12% of former Trump voters vote for Democrats, whether it's in, the Prop 50 redistricting ballot measure, or whether it was in New Jersey or Virginia's gubernatorial races, and on and on. And so there's some opportunity here to take what had previously been a really inelastic electorate and actually get some movement here, given the dismal approval ratings of the Republican Party. And so, but what issues in particular do you think are ripe for Democrats to exploit as we head toward midterms?
I've run for statewide office in Pennsylvania 3 times. I'm 3-0. And each time I set a record for receiving the most number of votes in those particular cycles. I share that with you because in my divided state, the only way to achieve that kind of electoral success is by getting votes not just from my fellow Democrats, but a whole lot of Republicans and independents as well. And so we've had a lot of ability to cross over and get people that may have voted for President Trump in a past election vote for me as well. And I think the reason for that is I show up in their communities, I listen, and then I deliver. I get stuff done for them. And when you show up and you really listen, rural, urban, suburban communities, neighborhoods that voted for Donald Trump, neighborhoods that voted for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, what you find is folks kind of basically just want the same few things. They want really good schools for their kids and grandkids. They want safe communities. They want economic opportunity in the neighborhoods where they want to live, and they want to be able to afford to live in those neighborhoods. And they want someone who's going to go out and protect their rights and freedoms every single day. That's the work I've done. That's the work I'm going to continue to do. I think that's the Pennsylvania way. And I want to continue to do that. What I have heard from Republicans and independents, to kind of get at the heart of your question, is a whole lot of buyer's remorse. Yeah, I go out to farms and talk to farmers, and they're getting killed because of Donald Trump's tariffs. And instead, Trump turns around, acknowledges that they're getting killed, and tries to offer them a handout. They don't want a handout. They want their markets to be able to sell their crops, to be able to sell their meats and their cheeses, and their poultry and dairy and everything else. We're seeing small businesses in communities that voted for Donald Trump getting hurt. We're seeing a whole lot of folks in rural Pennsylvania lose access to health care because of Trump's policies. And so what I think I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is a whole lot of buyer's remorse, a whole lot of people really realizing they got screwed by the guy that they put into office.
And finally, Gov, last thing before you leave, and that is I have to apologize because the last time we spoke was, I believe, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, and Russell Wilson was the quarterback of the Steelers, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was.
And you told me that they were, obviously the Eagles get all the attention, but as any good governor would do, you don't want to leave the Steelers out in the cold, and so you took the opportunity to brag a little bit about Russell Wilson, or to not make him feel like he was getting any shade. And I kind of scoffed at the fact that you were trying to put lipstick on that pig of having Russell Wilson as the quarterback of the Steelers. And what happened is this season, the Giants ended up with Russell Wilson as the quarterback. So I guess that's what I get for kind of mocking the fact that Russell Wilson was that quarterback there. But and here we are at the bottom of the
I was going to say,
East.
By the way, the Birds and the Steelers are in the playoffs this weekend, and I think the Giants are fishing right now.
Yeah, you know what? Not only are the Giants one of the worst teams in the league, but we don't even know how to lose correctly, because we had the opportunity where if we're going to be one of the last place teams, at least we can have a good draft pick. Yeah. And we have an incredible ability to make sure that we squander those that number 1 or number 2 draft pick every year now.
I know. Well, look, I'm going to defend you, which it is very hard for me to defend a Giants fan. But here's what I would say. You guys have an opportunity now, hopefully, to land Harbaugh, who's a hell of a coach.
Yep.
I think Jackson Dart is a stud. I mean, I think he's going to be in this league for a while.
Correct.
He's very good. Scadaboo is awesome. I mean, that guy is fearless.
If we can get him to wear a Guardian cap during some of these games, we might get more than 2 seasons out of him.
He needs whatever the hell's beyond a Guardian cap. And remember, Neighbors went down with, I think it was a knee injury early on. So you guys have a pretty good core. I mean, look, as a Birds fan, I hope you continue to lose, but I think the future is kind of bright for the Giants, and it pains me to say that, but I really think that.
No, I would agree. I feel good. Every Giants fan, obviously every football fan feels like the next season is definitely their season.
Yeah.
But I do feel like next season's definitely our season. But I don't know. We can put a little wager on this right now to see what do you think in terms of whether Giants or whether New York's teams. Well, I don't want to say New York's teams because I don't want to include the Jets in this, but whether the New York Giants are going to outperform the Eagles and or the Steelers next season. What do you think?
Okay, here's what I think. In the NFC East, the Birds will win the NFC East again. Here's what I think, though. I think the Giants will eclipse the Cowboys and the Commanders and finish in second place in the NFC East to make a run for that final wild card spot. That's what I think.
All right, well, diplomatic enough, but I have higher hopes, but we'll see. We got a year now to figure this out. So, Gov, with that said, best of luck on the campaign trail. Again, what is the either website or texting link that you wanted to talk about here?
Here's what I want you to do. Go over to joshshapiro.org to learn more about our campaign, or chip in $5 or whatever you can, or just text GSD, get stuff done, GSD to 32210.
Awesome. I'm going to put that link to your website right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video.
Great.
Gov, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks. See you soon.
To listen to the audio version of this episode, click the link right here on this screen, and please make sure to subscribe to my audio podcast. And of course, to see more of my video content, that subscribe button's on the screen as well.